So thank you again so much for everyone for joining us. I'm Sarah Brown, I'm Deputy Director of Collections Trust, and I will be taking you through this award event today, along with a couple of colleagues who've joined us as well. We're joined by our panel who have judged our award. So we're joined by Ruth, Shantae and Elizabeth, and Louise, who will be introducing our presenters today, which are 3 of our shortlisted submissions. So I'm going to introduce briefly the theme of this year's award. So this is an annual award that the Collections Trust run, and it's all about highlighting good collections management practice, which I think we can all agree doesn't necessarily always get the kudos that it deserves in these sorts of events. So it's really nice to celebrate just some good basic collections management. And the theme this year, we kept fairly broad. It was simply celebrating collections management. In previous years, we've had quite specific themes, like last year was all about rethinking cataloguing specifically. But this year, we invited applicants really who could link their work to any of these 3 campaigns that you can see on the screen here. So it could have been linked to Banish the Backlog, Rethinking Cataloguing, which is more about that inclusive practice, or It's Good to Share, which is all about sharing collections information. And indeed, a lot of the submissions hit 1, 2, or even 3 of those campaigns. So as I said, you'll be hearing from a few of the examples today. So we did have 14 fantastic submissions that our 3 judges, Ruth, Shantae and Louise, had to go through and then pick a shortlist. So you can see the 14 applicants on the screen here, and 3 of those have been shortlisted, which are the 3 that you're going to be hearing from today doing some presentations. So we're going to start with a presentation from National Museum of Royal Navy, we have Museum of Gloucester, and we also have the Egypt Centre in Swansea. So as I said, we're going to hear 3 presentations, and then towards the end of the session, hopefully around sort of 10 to 5 or 5 to 5, we will announce who has won the Collections Trust Award, and then hear a little bit from them about how they plan to use the prize money. So I'm going to hand over, first of all, to Louise, one of our judges, who is going to introduce our first presentation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm delighted to introduce the National Museum of Royal Navy. With this submission, the project clearly demonstrated 2 of the key award criteria within the updated Spectrum standard. Firstly, rethinking cataloguing with a very inclusive approach to the collection. And secondly, it showed the benefits of sharing collections to meet the needs of a range of users. It's a significant decolonisation project, which has been reflected in the museum's new online output, incorporating multiple amalgamated records. Interestingly, using AI, the team also produced a dynamic glossary with guidelines on alternative language and contextual information on language that has been used in the past. This allowed the creation of more inclusive technology to highlight minority or contested histories, as well as other narratives linked to the empire. So I'd like to hand over to Amy at the National Museum of the Royal Navy to talk a little bit more about addressing empire. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Louise, and for everyone. And thank you so much for shortlisting us. We're very excited to be here today and to talk about the project and kind of where we're at and where we're still hoping to go with it. So just a little bit of background. I'm Amy, I'm the Collections Information and Access Manager here at the National Museum of Royal Navy, but this project and the work we're doing really encompasses quite a lot of colleagues, so I'll try and talk about their work as well. So just a bit of background on the National Museum. Oops, I don't know if that's going or not. Typical, isn't it? We tried it and now it doesn't want to work. There we go. So the National Museum of the Royal Navy is kind of made up of individual sort of smaller museums as they were that each represented a different branch of the Navy. So things like our Submarine Museum, which was in Gloucester, our main naval museum in the dockyard in Portsmouth, also the Submarine Museum, or sorry, the Fleet Air Museum, which is out in Yeovilton. And we also have, I think, what we say is the Europe, if not the world's largest collection of historic ships as well. So we have HMS Victory again in Portsmouth, but we also have HMS Trincomalee up in Hartlepool and HMS Caroline, which is in Belfast as well. So as you can imagine, being the National Museum of the Royal Navy and our collections representing the history of the Royal Navy, we have a very broad collection, which is really a global collection that really tells the impact of the Royal Navy on not only the UK history, but really global history in the end, which includes things like themes around the British Empire and the role of the British Navy in sort of establishing the British Empire, but then maintaining it as well. And also lots of things, we represent an armed forces. So we have a lot of history around conflict as well, and kind of other sort of difficult histories we really need to think a lot about. So I just want to give a warning at the beginning of this presentation that some of the things that I might show or speak about might be seen as either upsetting, offensive, triggering, or other things. So again, if you want to kind of bow out for the next kind of 10 or 15 minutes because you find it upsetting, please do so. Or also please come and speak to us. We would love to engage further in these conversations. And what we are doing is also constantly evolving. So what I say today might be out of date in 10 minutes or even 5 minutes after the presentation. So we're also aware of that as well. So where did this kind of project all start? Well, it really began for us kind of in two places, sort of around the same time. So we had a project called Title Tea Time, which was an ARHC funded project, which we were able to bring in a community group we'd already been working with called Chat Over Chai and bring them in to do a kind of more focused research project, particularly around some key objects in our collections. At their choice, really, that really showcased the kind of history of the British Empire within our collections. And the project was really led to kind of revise approaches and treatments of those subjects and how we could further research them and better contextualize them and represent them going forward. At the same time, we had a request from our Board of Trustees to set up an advisory group in 2021, again, looking at reviewing the legacy of the British Empire, as many people were doing within their collections, and particularly around the story of the Royal Navy, and really having the engagement from the Royal Navy as well in that kind of history and involved. And that group was comprised of staff from across the business. The two really spoke to each other as well, as we're saying. So the Title Tea Time actually really helped shape that group. And they even renamed it because originally it was called the Decolonization Working Group. And when we spoke to the group about it, they found that really triggering and upsetting for various reasons. So they helped us kind of name that group as well. Both groups helped start to identify collections that needed further resource, required kind of particular contextualization and really areas of sensitivity. So for example, one that kind of comes up for us quite a lot is this Buddha statue, which was taken from what was known, or also known as the Summer Palace, by particular Royal Marines near the end of what is known as the Second China War in 1860 as well. So an example of some of the objects that you can find in our collection. And it's just worth noting we're still working with our Chat Over Chai group, and they're helping us on some other projects and upcoming work, particularly around things like HMS Trincomalee, which is up in Hartlepool, and kind of the history of that ship being built in India and things as well. So how did this start to filter down into our other areas of work in the organization? Well, one of the biggest aims of the Addressing Empire group was to actually look at and decolonize the language that we used in ourselves as an organization and thinking about that. So to do that, we looked at some glossary work, which lots of others are doing as well, and particularly about creating a specific glossary that worked for us as an organization. And my colleague, Hannah, was really involved in creating that and still is. And at the moment, it's now a dynamic document, which is over 100 pages long, lists various terms, some offensive and or outdated, some simply there just for information. It provides guidelines on alternative language people can use or how to contextualize that term, and also gives history of it as well. Again, being a kind of armed forces service museum, the Royal Navy have their own kind of language as well, which can be problematic, which is called Jack speak. So we not only have things in the glossary, which are kind of perhaps more obvious racist terms or things to do again with empire, but also things particularly to do with Navy. And this document, again, wasn't just created by staff, but we also had volunteers involved in creating it as well, and particularly where we have a wealth of volunteers who are ex-Royal Naval Service personnel themselves. They helped us as well with a lot of that Jack speak and how to better understand that. Colleagues then really used this and tried to promote it across the organization. And we did a lot of kind of advocacy sessions, and we have lunch and learn sessions to really get people engaged, understanding, and using it. And we've had quite a lot of success with that, with people really rethinking the terminology and the language that they're using in their work, whether that be volunteers or staff. So it's been really great. And again, it's a live document. So I think Hannah even did an update to it, I think just yesterday on our intranet, which was great. But we really wanted to think, how do we then reflect this in our collections? Is all this great work, we really need to embed this in our collections practices. This is kind of the bedrock of where our stories come from. So if we're not reflecting it there, then that's kind of a massive missed opportunity. So the first thing we did is we took that opportunity to review the language that we were using in our collections management system. When we started looking, it became very obvious that our collections data starkly showed old attitudes and really created intellectual barriers that we kind of already knew existed, but we hadn't really had a way to deal with up till now. So we used the glossary and we focused on key terms. We've not done them all, it is 100 pages, but we really picked some kind of key terms that we thought were really important to start with and kind of package them out to our curatorial team to review. So essentially, they did a text search on free text things like descriptions and titles and started looking for these terms and either replaced it where possible, or like in this example where it's the title of the item, we couldn't replace it. So just to better contextualize it and really add where we could as much kind of additional information as possible. Again, note this is still working. We're still lots of terms and language in our database that we're constantly trying to review, but it's something that, again, the staff are having a lot more confidence when they're cataloging something new or when they're updating records, that they can refer back to this glossary and have a way to kind of update that information appropriately. The other big thing we did at the time as well, which we thought was really keen, was to introduce what we call content warnings. So we didn't want to hide these things away. We didn't want to hide these histories. We wouldn't want it to be really open about them, but we also wanted to give people, whether they were internal users or external audiences, the options to engage with these histories. So we thought the best way to do this was to introduce these content warnings, which you can see pop up in the actual description themselves. So as much as possible, and where we've had time, we not just add content warning, but again, we add the context of why that content warning is there. And also even in the title, because it might be like an exact title, like this example is from a photograph album where that's what it's been physically titled in that item. So we can't really kind of change that, but also like just in the description as well. We also introduced visual content warnings, so that people could, again, when there is an image, this is once you clicked onto an item on our online portal, but it will come up before you click on, that will be the first image. So you don't see the actual image of the digitized image of the item, you see that first and you can then choose. At the same time, we were bringing in a digital asset management system. So actually how we were layering these digital images in the content warnings, we did actually lose that functionality, unfortunately, because the way our images feed. But it then really opened a conversation with us between our DAMs and our CMS supplier to say, right, this is something that actually perhaps should be embedded in these systems and an option that's available in the system. And we've found kind of a community of other users who are having the same thing. And we're really looking forward to kind of the update to our DAM system, which should hopefully bring in this functionality directly in the system going forward. Not only did we want to bring this in digitally, but also in a physical setting as well. You know, we're kind of used to kind of going in our stores and not thinking twice about necessarily what we were looking at all the time. And again, working through that Title Tea Time project, we brought the community group into it, and they perhaps opened a box of photographs and immediately found something that they found quite triggering on just lifting a lid on a box of photographs. Again, we didn't think about that necessarily in the past in the same way, or even we had a more recent example of a query through our access service and a member of staff like looking at some items, and again where we have conflict items, again looking at photographs and then potentially showing things like dead bodies, etc., to be quite upsetting. So we've brought in physical things as well, such as content warning stickers, but also physical like folders around items depending on what it is, so that again people can choose whether to see it or not, and just be warned about that before they open that content. So again, it's about when we find these things, we're trying as much as possible to do it at every opportunity we can. And we also give warnings now to the public before they go on a stores tour as well, so they're aware that they might come across things that they find upsetting, and to kind of encourage those conversations where people feel comfortable having them with us. In a similar vein, we were doing a really large project to completely update and change our collections, our online collections portal at the time. So we only had about 1% of our collections available online, and it was all very edited and pretty. And we were moving towards the model of actually releasing the vast majority of our collections online where we could. So we went from 1% to 70% of the collections being available online. And we really wanted to highlight and focus that this really key work was going on and that we were conscious of it as well while we were doing this. So we immediately wanted to put a kind of statement available on our collections portal, which again, we looked around at a lot of other organizations who are doing great work in this area as well and tried to fit something that worked for us. And again, just to say that we're open to these conversations and we really want people to engage where they can. Unfortunately, we haven't necessarily had anybody, or maybe fortunately, I'm not sure, engage or kind of contact us from this vein as of yet, but we would really encourage people to do so. And again, just recognizing that this is ongoing work for us as well and a learning curve. The last one that we were really kind of interested in is keywords and how people search and look for these collections. You know, we've been really great in the past about outlining our kind of comfort area of like really particular naval history. But like we've said, we've always been aware that our collections are very global, have a really global impact, and also have a lot of other histories involved in them that aren't necessarily easy to find or search for. Even things like themes like around LGBTQ, our keywords don't necessarily reflect and therefore make these items visible. If you can't search and find it on the database, then how are you going to know that there's these items in the collection that can help better represent these histories and these communities? So we really took a long look at our terminology and restructured it so we could better highlight and have better keywords and terminologies that we could apply to our databases to highlight these. But we also were really interested in how we could use AI technologies to generate these keywords as well. And we were interested as to whether it would just perpetuate the biases that already existed using these technologies, or whether it would actually help us and highlight, you know, histories that we hadn't necessarily thought of and keywords we wouldn't necessarily think of. So we've been doing a number of trials with our partners at the University of Southampton and also the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium around using these technologies and how they have worked. And I would say it's a bit of a split. So we had some examples where they clearly are perpetuating bias. So you can see this example on screen here is a description that we did a lot of work that's clearly been sort of edited and better contextualized. So we don't want to use the terms battlefield trophy anymore. That's like kind of outdated language for us. But unfortunately, what's the first thing that it spat back at us? Trophy and battlefield. So it was a really interesting example to say that's something we purposely removed and it's kind of regenerated and brought that back to us. Also, it does seem very good at bringing up words like World War II and kind of general sort of themes and topics that, you know, we naturally would. But an area that perhaps it is really helpful, which we're not great at adding, is really like those place names, those geolocations that we don't necessarily always have time to tag out. And it's really been helpful in that area. So in many ways, it spurred us on to continue doing this work and to continue working in it and really help these technologies develop and train in a way that are going to better represent future themes and ideas going forward, and also help made us think about where we put our data and how we publish our data into the public domain, areas like Wikipedia and things that we can kind of better increase the sources that these technologies are trained on so that they have better examples and things to be trained off of rather than continue to perpetuate those biases as well. So just again, thank you very much. Again, this is an ongoing thing for us, really. And I'd like to thank my other colleagues, Claire, Hannah, and Karen, who've been involved. And just to say that this work has really provided, and this project has really provided us with a great foundation and the confidence to be able to talk about these subjects, better contextualize them, and think about how we can better share these stories going forward and involve the communities who are involved. And we're working on that through other projects, such as a figurehead project that we have going on right now, which you can see one of our figureheads, HMS Madagascar, which is obviously very embroiled in different contextual history. So we really feel confident we can take it into other projects and deploy it in other ways now as well, which is great.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate it. I'm going to hand over now to Ruth, who's going to introduce our next presentation.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so next up, we've got the Museum of Gloucester. For us judges, we felt that this project was a really great example of our Rethinking Cataloguing and Banishing the Backlog campaigns, and it also reflected this year's theme of celebrating collections management. Covered the ground routes of improving backlog cataloguing to Spectrum standards, addressing errors in existing documentation, and undertaking care work to preserve the collection for future. We also admired how the museum had the vision to go beyond the fact-checking and preservation exercise and rethink the collection through the lens of people-centred cataloguing, considering how uniform represents lived experience. The project sees the opportunity to really bring the collection to life by including social history narratives and creating contemporary relevance by involving local artists and opening debate around politics and gender. As the first collections management project undertaken by the museum in 4 years, we were impressed by the scope and imagination of the project, and in particular, the upskilling and the improved confidence that it gave to all the museum and staff and volunteers involved. So I'd like to hand over to Elizabeth and Victoria to take us through the project in a bit more detail.
Hi, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. We are really, really excited to be here today. So I'm Elizabeth, I'm the Museum Collections Officer, and this is Victoria, who is our Museum Project Officer. So we are the Museum of Gloucester. We're run by Gloucester City Council, so we're a local authority run museum telling kind of the story of the city. We have about 750,000 objects, which covers everything from archaeology to natural history to numismatics, art, social history, from prehistory to modern day. So quite a large collection to deal with.
We thought it'd be useful to share a bit about the documentation issues and the backlog we faced going into the project. So all of our different collection areas were previously managed very separately. They each had individual curators and they had an individual approach to absolutely everything, from cataloguing to numbering to filing. Absolutely everything was different. So we're at a point where we're trying to bring all of that together. It sounds dramatic to say that we're drowning in paperwork, but we really are. And I'm sure many of you will know that some of those files have incredibly useful and insightful information inside that you can't find anywhere else, but others are also empty or filled with duplicate information or redundant information. There's also no filing system, so no coherent system, and we have filing cabinets all over the building, so physically locating files is also a challenge. And unfortunately it's a similar situation with our electronic files. So again, no file structure was ever put in place, so again, locating files is difficult. And because we have different approaches to the numbering of files, even the search functions on the electronic file systems are not reliable. We do have a collections management system. So the Museum of Gloucester has been using modes for over 25 years, but unfortunately it's never become a fully utilised system. There's just some examples of some of the records that we have on our modes. And as you can see, the information is very limited, very sparse. There's different approaches to numbering. The associations are very rarely filled in, and when they are, they're not detailed enough. It's a bit difficult to see, but on one of those it does say belong to the husband of the donor, which is something that we quite often find where in the cataloguing process the name of the owner of the object hasn't even been recorded. So that's just a small insight into the modes records that we have. And then just to add an extra challenge going into this project, that Gloucester City Council was actually the victim of a fairly serious cyber incident. So our access to modes and our electronic files was actually removed for 12 months while they were recovering that. So yeah, we had a bit of a challenge going into this project.
So this project for us was funded, so it's funded by Arts Council England and South West Museum Development. And for us, we had quite a few different aims that we wanted to achieve with it. It was about promoting and increasing access to the costume collection, which needed improved care after not being assessed for many years, and it was very poorly stored and largely inaccessible as well. We wanted to promote a very positive narrative about the folk collection decant and inventory project. So we are in the process of moving 25 25,000 objects from a former museum to new storage, and combining that with the Museum of Gloucester's collection as a whole. And this project for us was also about kind of reducing that kind of the myths and the kind of reducing the confusion over the status and management of our social histories collection. We also wanted to research the costume collection, understand where the gaps were, and improve the quality of the records for future use. We specifically wanted to do people-centred cataloguing. We wanted to explore how uniforms represented lived experience and how we could capture that information for future, as well as for the exhibition itself. We wanted to update and ensure that our existing records are accurate and up to date, so that we are at least meeting the minimum standards set out by Spectrum and accreditation standards. We also wanted to create a new documentation plan and new acquisitions process to address the learnings from this project as a whole. Upskilling the collections team and volunteers was also really important to us. We are a relatively new team at the museum, although a few of us have worked in heritage for a while, as a team, we've only been working together for about 3 years. So it was really important to be able to share that kind of knowledge and skills between us, and also expand that to the engagement and learning team, as well as our front of house team. We wanted to create new and strengthen existing partnerships with individuals, communities, and important stakeholders within the city of Gloucester. And particularly, we wanted to encourage our residents, and particularly young people, to take pride in Gloucester's history and heritage, and engage them about the importance of the museum collections, what is missing, and what we can collect going forward to ensure that we are representing the city as a whole. So what did we actually do? So the ultimate goal was put on an exhibition called Buttons, Badges and Blazers, Uniforms from the Gloucester City Costume Collection. That ran from the 21st of October to the 7th of January. It included 20 fully mounted costumes, as well as numerous other objects displayed alongside 2 contemporary commissions and an accompanying engagement programme. So in order to create this, over 230 costumes and accessories were fully inventoried, checked, cleaned, frozen to remove any pest infestations, and repacked for transport and long-term storage. We completed full condition assessments as well, including individual photographs, and that was all done by our collections team and volunteers. Over 100 costume records were individually researched, updated and enhanced, meaning that they've been taken beyond that purely fact-gathering exercise and creating full records that will be used for many years beyond this project.
So the need to create some engaging and accurate interpretation really gave us the opportunity to address some of the issues with our records and look at how we can rethink cataloguing and records enhancements going forward. I could literally talk to you about this all afternoon, but we won't. So we've picked a couple examples that were really important to us. So when researching a donation of several school uniforms and a Cub Scout uniform, we managed to track down the original entry form, and that had some lovely reference photographs, particularly of Scout groups, but there was no copyright or terms of use information with any of those images. Another staple of our documentation issues that we are battling. But there was also a funny little note on the record about making sure that we didn't publicise this donation. And it was that sort of triggered us to realise that these items actually belong to Ian Dench. Now, many of you may know that Ian is actually one of the founding members of the band, the 90s band EMF. They sang the Unbelievable song, which I won't sing for you all because everyone at the museum is sick of me singing that song. So luckily, we've got some colleagues at the Gloucester Guildhall, which is an excellent live events venue if you ever get a chance to visit. And they were able to track down the band's management company. So literally within days, I was actually on the phone to Ian and was able to chat to him. And he was so supportive of this project. He had no idea that his mum had donated all these uniforms to the museum, but he was so thrilled to bits. So he actually agreed to come to the museum on one of his visits to Gloucester when he was going to see his mum. And we had a wonderful afternoon where we showed him the uniforms and we had a really good chat. We were actually able to interview him And he spoke so passionately about his experiences, particularly about his school experience and how the teachers that inspired him to get into music, but also about his participation in the Cub Scout gang shows and how they gave him confidence, but also how he used to keep the subs so he could get fish and chips on the way home and not tell his mum. So we managed to record all this interview as well. So we managed to have that as audio-visual content for the exhibition, but we were also able to use that on our socials. And we were also, I'm really happy to say, involved Shauna, who was our apprentice at the time, who's brilliant at filming and social media. So it was a great opportunity for her to use her skills as well. And her mum is a big EMF fan, so I think she got extra brownie points for that. And really, a really great unforeseen advantage that came from this research into these items was that Ian then decided to donate his EMF t-shirt, which is the tie-dye t-shirt you can see in the images. So this is the t-shirt that he wore in the original Unbelievable music video in the 90s, which was actually filmed at the Gloucester Guildhall. So quite relevant to Gloucester, but also really helps us to start filling those gaps in our collection. So we were really pleased to be able to add that into the exhibition, but also as a sort of jumping off point to talk to our visitors about contemporary collecting and what we should be collecting going forward and how to make it more relevant to Gloucester. So the next item I'd like to talk to you about is this beautiful 1970s district nurse and midwife uniform, possibly the most coveted coat in the entire exhibition. I'm surprised it didn't go wandering. So this belonged to the wonderful Iris, who I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know Iris during this project. So as we started to research this item, we tracked down again the original entry form and found again some amazing reference photography that had no copyright or terms of use information, but we really wanted to use them in the exhibition. So as Iris had actually only donated her uniform in the early 2000s, we took a punt and decided to just phone the number on the entry form. And I don't know who was more shocked when she answered the phone, her or me. I'm pretty sure she thought I was a scam artist at first, but soon after we were getting on like a house on fire. And she was so excited to be included in this exhibition and so proud and so really pleased that the uniform was actually going to be seen and used. So she actually managed to track down additional items that she still had. So her fetal stethoscope, her original belt, some badges and more photographs. And she actually lent us those so we could use them to enhance the display that we had. And again, like with Ian, interviewing her was a real privilege. You know, we really got to learn more about her experience of working in Gloucester during that time, which we would never have got from a bit of paper. So again, it was a real privilege. And not only did she provide us with more information about her uniform, but she was actually also able to offer insight into the other nursing outfits and uniforms that we had in the collection. So really giving us a special insight into those other items in our collection as well. And another unforeseen advantage of this work was that we were really able to benefit from Iris's enthusiasm for this project. She essentially promoted this exhibition for us within her local community. She went into her grandchildren's schools and spoke about it. She spoke about it in the nursing community of which she's still a part of. So it was really lovely to benefit from her enthusiasm and excitement. So much that I'm surprised the marketing team didn't give her a job, to be honest. She was doing a great job. So just quickly to tell you about Colin, because we didn't actually track down all the people that we were able to feature in the exhibition. So this is Colin's uniform. It was one of the more filled out modes records that we had to work with, but again, it was full of errors. Luckily though, we were able to track down a Pearson family archive within Gloucestershire Archives. So we worked with the team there and we were able to build a complete biography of Colin, and we were able to find this photograph of him in his military uniform, which we were able to use in the exhibition, which really added to the whole to the interpretation all about Colin.
I'll just finish up on some learnings if you're okay to the next slide. Thank you. So banishing the backlog can be done by incorporating into our other activities. Just take it bit by bit is what we'd say. It's time consuming, but so worthwhile. So much more can come from the research, not just improved records, but new opportunities, new procedures, new friends and partners. As a whole, the exhibition opened debates for us about identity, politics and gender and their place within uniforms. It also included lone objects that share the stories of people not typically represented by our collections, specifically LGBTQIA+ and women. It's given us such a great understanding of how the museum can collect objects that share the stories and not shy away from controversial subjects. Museums are not neutral. It increased our confidence as a team. It increased confidence by stakeholders and sector professionals, and also kind of shared that we do really hold important collections for everyone. And it massively combined paper and digital files, resolved multiple historic issues and created some great frameworks for future projects as well. So it's demonstrated that prioritising collections management and enhanced cataloguing at the point of acquisition, including those emotional and sensory experiences of the donor, can banish the backlog and create meaningful, powerful engagement that allows visitors, stakeholders and staff to connect. Thank you very much.
Thank you both, much appreciated. That was really interesting. Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Shantae, the third of our panel, who is going to introduce our third and final presentation.
Yes, that's great. Yes, I'm Shantae. Hello, everyone. And I'm very pleased to introduce Swansea University with a project that really aligns with all three recent Collections Trust campaigns. So Banish the Backlog, Rethinking Cataloguing, and It's Good to Share. As judges, what we really loved about this project is it very clearly demonstrates how good collections management enables effective audience engagement. Really innovative project, and that innovation lies in its ambition to reach and engage with online audiences through a range of formats and languages and multiple platforms, so extending far beyond the idea of that standard online catalogue. So very pleased to introduce Dr. Ken Griffin and Sam Powell to tell you more.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here today in order to talk a little bit about the Egypt Centre and the Rediscovering Egypt collaboration that we've had with Harrogate Museum as well as Avocet Collections, which Sam will be talking a little bit about. The Harrogate Egyptian Collection is a project which started just over a year ago. In fact, in the 20th of February, just of last year, the objects arrived to Swansea as part of a loan with Harrogate Museum. So this is a collaborative project between the Egypt Centre, North Yorkshire Council, where Harrogate Museum is based, as well as Avocet Collections, which is the company that uses or that produces the online catalogue that we use here at the Egypt Centre, which has now been branched out for the Harrogate Egyptian Collection, which you see the homepage just on your screen now. So the collection, as I said, it arrived here just over a year ago, and it was on the BBC News for the Rare Egyptian Collections artifacts coming to Swansea. There were 813 objects. And these, some of them were on display in the Royal Pump Museum in Harrogate, but only around about 30 or 40 objects out of over 800 Egyptian or so objects that arrived to Swansea at the Egypt Centre. Now, the Egypt Centre is a small university museum based at Swansea University, which houses around about 6,000 objects themselves, largely from Egypt, but also some from the ancient world, such as Greece, Rome, Cyprus, Mesopotamia. And we use the collection very much within our teaching, a lot of object-based learning at Swansea University and through the collection itself. So how did the collection arrive to Swansea? Well, it all happened around about a year and a half ago when Sam Powell, who we'll be talking with in just a little bit, visited Harrogate Museum in order to see this wooden figure, which you see on the screen. This was part of her PhD research. Sam is a volunteer, has been a volunteer at the Egypt Centre for 20 years now. But as part of her PhD research, she's re-examining the wooden figures that you see on the screen here, visiting museums throughout the UK, and has documented around about 2,000 or so of the figures. Harrogate Museum had one of them, which comes from the site of Beni Hassan in Egypt. It was during her visit, when she was speaking with the curatorial staff, at Harrogate when they said that very few people have come to study the Egyptological material within the stores. In fact, I think they said that around about 5 years since the last researcher that really came there to see the Egyptological collection. And so they were looking at ways in which they could perhaps make the collection more accessible to Egyptologists, scholars, but also the wider public. And Sam suggested that perhaps they collaborate with the Egypt Centre at Swansea University, because of a lot of our online engagement that we've been doing with our catalogue, but also with the teaching aspect and the expertise that we have, because Harrogate Museum didn't have the Egyptological expertise to deal with these objects. So after several months of negotiations, the collection arrived to Swansea, let's say, on the 28th of February, just last year. Since the collection has been here, all the objects have been photographed from multiple angles and also put online in a new online catalogue for the first time. We've also been able to find a number of stories out about the objects which we didn't know about before. So, for example, the Shapti figure, which you see in the top left-hand side of your screen. Shaptis are basically servant figures that were placed within the tombs to do the work for the deceased in the afterlife. And this one belongs to a king called Seti I, who was the father of Ramesses the Great, one of the most well-known rulers from Egyptian history. What we only found out after this object arrived to Swansea is that it was previously in the collection of Lord Swansea, and in fact had been on display in his mantelpiece just 100 meters away from the Egypt Centre before it was sold in 1919. And it was collected by a local Harrogate man called Benjamin Kent before eventually being deposited in the Harrogate Museum in 1969. So that was an unexpected link with Swansea that we really weren't expecting. And the image that you see on the right-hand side was another really unexpected link with Swansea, because what we have here are two coffin fragments. The lower fragment is from Harrogate Museum, while the upper one is from the Egypt Centre. We had no idea that these two fragments joined together, but on a Friday afternoon, just 5 minutes before we were due to leave work, I decided to have a quick look at that, and I thought, well, the way the hieroglyphs are written look very similar to a fragment that we have in the Egypt Centre, and I took it out and they just happened to join. And very excitingly, what they provide is the name of the owner for the first time. I was always very frustrated with the upper fragment because we couldn't read the names. Now we can. And the fragment, the ostracon that you see in the lower left-hand corner, this is another object that was quite exciting. I can read hieroglyphs, but I can't read hieratic, the form of the script which is used here. So I sent it to an expert in the Netherlands, Professor Rob de Marie, who instantly replied very excitedly about this because he had seen a photograph of it before. Some Egyptian colleagues had taken a photograph of it in a museum in England, but didn't specify where. So he had been contacting a lot of museums trying to find this piece without success. Well, it turns out that this is a letter which was written around about 1200 BC by a man called Nachtamun to his brothers Kai and Baki, requesting some goose fat for their father who is ill and can't sleep very well. The letter then ends, so you assume that the goose fat has been delivered. But Rob has been able to find another ostracon in Berlin, which was written the following day, and it says, please can you send more goose fat because the cat has eaten it, i.e. the stuff that was delivered in this previous letter. So a nice little story that we can get from the objects themselves revealed for the first time. And it's not just the stories that we're keen on developing and learning more about. We are going to be putting 3 exhibitions together with the material. And the first one is called Causing Their Names to Live. This is an expression that the ancient Egyptians used because they believed that your name needed to survive in order for you to have an afterlife. So since the collection has been here, we've been able to identify over 80 names of individuals, including, for example, the one that I mentioned on the coffin earlier. Not only do we have his name, Osiris-Mes, but we have the name of his mother and father. So we're giving life back again to the ancient Egyptians, which I think is very powerful and one of the key aims of the Egypt Centre collection, especially with this project. So I'm going to pass over to Sam in the next slide, but just to say that the online catalogue was launched in October 2023 with all 813 objects on there, almost 4,000 images, as well as 3D models of the objects as well. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Ken. So my name's Sam Powell. As Ken's mentioned, I've been a volunteer at the Egypt Centre for many, many years, currently doing an Egyptology PhD, and Abbasit Collections, my company, came about quite organically. I was very frustrated, as I know a lot of you know, as Gloucester have mentioned, online catalogues don't always have all the information there, everything you need. And often they've been designed by a software developer who hasn't really got that experience of what it's like to be in the trenches in a museum and really understanding how we need to access this stuff. So I was very, very fortunate to work with the Egypt Centre, and we launched the Egyptian online collection for the Egypt Centre in 2020. We had a soft early launch because of COVID. We wanted to make sure the collection was accessible, even though people couldn't come in person. And it's been such a wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful to the Egypt Centre. Ken's already told you a little bit about how I first became connected with the Harrogate collection. So luckily I was allowed to then also use Abbasit Collections for the Harrogate material as well. So hopefully this little video is going to work. So the example I'm showing here is trying to enter the word cat into an online catalogue. And if you haven't got this kind of predictive text element to it, you're going to get things like the education has cat in it, catalogue has cat in it, mummification has cat in it. You can choose the exact example you want. You then have these beautiful images all taken by Ken, which come up, and you can easily find what you're looking for. You can click on the object. We have all these different fields included. When it's in blue, it means you can click on it. So I could look specifically at the sculptures, or I could look specifically at animal figurines if I wanted to drill down. And these photos move across in a beautiful carousel as well, making it really easy to see the image in good detail. I will canter through as I'm very aware of time. We also have hierarchical searches as well. So something I found particularly working with Egyptian objects, if you're interested in a specific site, such as Abydos, for example, here, I might not want to search by Egypt. I might want to search specifically by Abydos. And then this little plus here, I could then search in even more depth and choose a specific tomb if we know that tomb number. And it helps us bring together these pieces and try and piece these stories back together. So I'm trying to think when I create these catalogues of all the things different researchers might be looking for and how we can make their lives a little bit easier. As Ken touched upon, we also have these gorgeous 3D models, which I'm terrible at driving, so apologising for the bad driving in the video, but just to give you an idea, this is the beautiful Anubis head from Harrogate. We also record the object history as well, which is something that's very important, realising how these objects came into the country, trying to address some of these colonial issues we have. We can look at the auction lot, we can search by specific auctions to try and find other objects that may have arrived at the same time as well. And one of the features I absolutely adore, and was something I was quite insistent we had to include no matter what, I can see Ken smirking at me, was the trails. So these work a little bit like an audio trail, but they're a little bit more flexible as well. So this is the trail we've made initially for the Harrogate loan, linking into the exhibition they have on at the moment. And it was really, really important to us to make sure this is available in a lot of other languages. I won't go through all the languages we've got on screen, but notably we have the Welsh, as we're a museum in Wales, and very importantly, Egyptian Arabic as well. We want to be able to engage with those communities where these objects came from. They have a right to be able to engage as well. So as I was saying, we can walk through the gallery with your phone, with your headphones on, and listen to an audio tour around the gallery. Or because we have these amazing 3D models and great photography, you can sit on the bus and go through these things. If you haven't got headphones, not a problem, you've got the text written in as well. So we've tried to really think around all the different ways that people might be wanting to access these things. And there's also the option to make your own trails as well. I know it's something a lot of the lecturers use very, very often to put together a group of objects for the students. You could just put together a trail because I like all the objects that are blue, and you could make a trail of that. So it gives you that extra level of engagement and chance to really connect with the objects a little bit more. So here's the link. Please do check us out. It's a really, really lovely collection to work with. The Egypt Centre have done a fabulous job getting all the information in there so quickly. I'm mind-boggled how great a job they've done on getting everything in the catalogue so quickly. It's a work in progress. Things get updated in real time. So if Ken finds another piece in the collection that matches up, we can update the collection straight away, and that event information online, which is absolutely wonderful. And I'll pass back to you, Ken, for your thank yous.
Yeah, so thank you, Sam, and just finish off by thanking everybody who has been involved in the project. As mentioned, it is very much a collaborative one. It couldn't happen without North Yorkshire Council, along with the curatorial staff at Harrogate Museum, May Catt, Karen Southworth, and Nicola Baxter, as well as, of course, the volunteers who spent many weeks boxing up all the objects before they arrived to Swansea. The Ogdens of Harrogate and the Ogden family, who donated some of the objects in the 1930s, and are still very much big supporters of Harrogate Museum. Sam, of course, and Avocet Collections, Katie Greenhalgh and Gary Lewson, who produced a number of videos documenting the collection coming to Swansea. And of course, the Egypt Centre staff, volunteers, Swansea University staff and students who have all been involved in the cataloguing process. And really, even today, we had a handling session where we used 9 objects from the Harrogate collection. So it's very much used here as a teaching aid, both in person, but also online. And the external experts such as Rob Desmarie for their help and support. And thank you again to the Collection Trust for recognising this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Sam. So the moment has arrived. We've had our 3 presentations. Thank you to everyone who has presented. We're now going to be announcing the winner, and I'm going to hand over back to Ruth, one of our panel, who's going to do so.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, as you can all imagine, having gone through those presentations, choosing a winner was a very hard decision. And the amount of work and dedication that's gone into all these projects is remarkable, and so many projects encapsulated Collections Trust campaigns brilliantly. But the judges were looking in particular for a project that really exemplified the positivity of this year's core theme of celebration. Based on this, we're delighted to announce the winner of the 2023 Collections Trust Award is the Museum of Gloucester for their buttons, badges and blazers, costumes, uniforms from the Gloucester City Costume Collection. Our winning entry really captures the spirit of celebrating collections management, partly through the breadth of its reach, but mostly through the positive impact it had on volunteers, museum professionals and the local community, which shone through. The project documented the museum's journey from self-described anxiety before the work began to a new awareness of the value of the collection and tangibly increased confidence at the end. And the pride and enthusiasm of all of those involved was really infectious and felt like a true celebration of collections management. So really well done, Elizabeth and Victoria and everyone at the Museum of Gloucester. And thank you to everybody for entering such brilliant projects.
Thank you, Ruth, for announcing our winner. I don't know if Elizabeth and Victoria, would you like to come on very briefly and tell us a bit about how you're planning on using the award money? It'd be great for everyone to hear that if you're happy to.
Thank you so much. I'll be honest, I think it's still sinking in a bit for us both. But yeah, no, I just want to say a really quick thank you to Arts Council England, South West Museum Development and Gloucester City Council for kind of funding and supporting this project. It has been such a kind of great project to be a part of. Yes, so we're going to be using the money to go towards paying for a bit of a data cleanse of modes. So kind of using it to kind of clear up some of the data sets that we have, sort out some of the historic issues that and documentation backlog as well, so that going forward, it's a much more usable and accessible system for us all. So thank you so much to the Collections Trust for picking us as your winner.
Thank you both. Thank you for presenting, and thank you for telling us a little bit about how you're planning on using the money. It sounds like a really nice basic documentation use of the money, which is really great to hear. It sounds like it'll be really valuable for resolving those backlogs as well. So appreciate you telling us about that. Thank you very much. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming and to listening to our presentations. Thank you again to all of our presenters from our 3 museums, and congratulations again to Elizabeth and Victoria from Museum of Gloucester, and to your colleagues as well for winning our 2023-24 Collections Trust Award. So thank you again to all of of our presenters. Thank you as well to our three panelists who judged the award and gave such lovely introductions, and to Ruth as well for announcing our winner. And hopefully see you all again next year. Hopefully some of you are inspired to apply for our next year's award, and hopefully see you all soon. Thank you all again for coming.